Thanks for coming out. I'm Matt Shapiro, partner at Multicoin Capital. Really excited to be chatting with Ben Leventhal, who is the founder and CEO of Blackbird, which is a recent investment that we've made on the venture side. Blackbird is kind of in stealth, I guess. So we'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek at what's going on there. And we'll talk about Web3 and the future of consumer loyalty, which means that we need to really understand consumer loyalty. Thankfully, Ben has spent the last 20 years really at the cutting edge of hospitality. And I think at this point, probably every single person here has engaged with the products that you've created or at least been a part of. I feel pretty confident saying that. So why don't we start there and sort of touch on sort of your background and the path that you've taken?
Yeah, I mean, I have a real passion for restaurants. I'm lucky that I've sort of been able to craft a career around that. I feel like we've talked a lot today about optimization. I've basically spent my career optimizing for getting into good restaurants. It's a funny industry that I've always been drawn to. Restaurants are quirky. It's an $860 billion a year industry in 2022, give or take. 70% of the players are independent restaurants making $5 to $10 million a year, which has just made it kind of a fascinating, interesting playing field, I think, for me. You know, as a consumer, you walk into a restaurant, you get sucked in and you never want to leave when you're at a great restaurant. And on the merchant side, the barriers to entry are quite low. So in some ways, anyone and everyone could open a restaurant, and many people sort of come out of one career into restaurants and sort of stumble into success because it turns out they're good at hospitality. But yeah, I mean, it's the connectivity between merchants and consumers in restaurants is really strong, and I think it's few industries where that connectivity matters more than it does to hospitality operators. And I guess I've been lucky enough to just, play in a category that I have a lot of passion for.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really glad that I know you now so I can get into some of those restaurants.
I have very few skills, but if you need access to Carbone, I'm your guy.
Perfect. I will probably take you up on that. So, you've been involved in the industry for a long time. Founder of Eater, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Founder of Resi, which I think everyone has used at this point, and American Express sort of recently bought them. So you've had this arc within a specific industry. That's been the constant, is the industry, but the technology around it has changed dramatically over a couple decades.
Yeah.
How has that sort of impacted the restaurant business and consumers?
Yeah, so I think if you track technology in restaurants all the way back to the credit card, which is mid-50s, and I think arguably credit cards are the first sort of large-scale technology to be adapted in restaurants, then in many ways you're tracking basically the insertion of middlemen into the relationship that I just talked about between restaurants and consumers, and actually the relationship has gotten kind of more and more tenuous as time has gone on because the money is in being the middleman between them, right? The restaurants are making 5, 6, 7, 8%. Amex is a really, really good business, right? So the history of tech in restaurants, for that reason, is somewhat complicated. Mm-hmm. I think at its best, technology has empowered restaurants to deliver hospitality and has created magical consumer experiences around discovery and hopefully, booking. Hopefully, Resi, is a decent booking experience. But I think, certainly this most recent chapter, which I would say is, let's put reservations aside for a second, is really about the delivery companies. Certainly in COVID, the last couple of years, we've just seen the massive adoption of delivery products across the restaurant space, and all of a sudden, pretty much every restaurant is now also offering delivery of some kind. On the one hand, it's a lot of consumers pointed at restaurants, like, Uber Eats and DoorDash are absolute monsters when it comes to acquisition. Like, they have tons and tons of custom consumers. There's a demand fire hose there. But on the other hand, they're taking a humongous vig. So, I think restaurants, they have more technology than ever at their disposal, especially when it comes to, I think, top of funnel, meaning how to expose their brands and attract consumers to their product. But I think this to some extent leads us to Blackbird, fewer and fewer pieces of technology that really are about direct connectivity. And so I think the leverage restaurants have in terms of marketing and in terms of delivering hospitality directly, I think they have virtually no leverage right now, which creates an opportunity.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, I think it's almost paralysis by analysis, where I log into any one of these and there's 10,000 restaurants. I mean, everyone delivers to you, and it's just like the curation aspect. It's harder, and it feels like, as great as technology has been for us, especially in this industry, it's certainly commoditized what it is. Every restaurant's kind of the same.
Yes.
Which is very different than what you were saying before, where it's, hey, the genesis of the credit card, like look at what it dates back to in Diners Club. So that kind of brings us to Blackbird. Like what is Blackbird, and like how do you bring all of this sort of back to its roots?
So Blackbird is going to be a loyalty and payments platform, Web3 powered, really focused on creating direct connectivity between restaurants and guests and empowering restaurants with direct one-on-one connectivity tools to instill loyalty and drive up the LTV of their customers.
So where do you start?
That's a good question. We start with that assumption, right? Connectivity, and I keep using that word because it's kind of it's top of mind for us, Blackbird. But if we go out to dinner tomorrow night and we don't have a reservation, and we spend a bunch of money or not, but we walk in and have a good time, and both of us have an interest in returning to the restaurant and connecting with the restaurant, neither us nor the restaurant has any tools at its disposal really to do that, right? They don't know that we were there other than having captured the last 4 digits of one of our credit cards or both of our credit cards. Some of the POS companies are sort of sharing some data, but if the restaurants are sort of trying to say, wow, these guys came in and let me figure out how to re-engage with them, they don't have any tools at their disposal. So what we really want to do with Blackbird is start with kind of that observation and that idea that restaurants should have the ability to connect with as close to 100% of the people that come through the door of the restaurant as possible. And if we give them that ability and we give them interesting, compelling, cutting-edge ways to do so, then really good things are going to happen from a loyalty and engagement perspective.
And I guess, why does this exist? Like, it seems like common sense to me. Like, hey, a restaurant wants to know who their customers are. But when you frame it this way, it's pretty obvious. If I just walk in, no one really knows who I am. They don't tie my spend or what I like or anything like that. I guess, is there some structural reason that doesn't exist today? Or the restaurants, like, they obviously want this information? Yeah,
I mean, the information is being harbored by the credit cards, right? To some extent, the delivery companies. I don't think in sort of a nefarious way, but I think credit cards are using that information to develop loyalty products and data products that are for them, right? So I think there's not a heavy incentive for credit cards to share that data. And coming back to sort of where we started, which is to say most restaurants in this humongous industry have virtually no leverage because they're tiny, right? So you start to understand why the paradigm is set up the way it is.
Got it. And so that makes sense to me that you foster sort of connectivity amongst the restaurants and why they want this. What about me as a consumer? Like for me, like it kind of feels like it works. I go in, I use my credit card, I pay, everything seems fine. Like what does Blackbird do for the consumer?
So I think that we have 2 kinds of restaurants fundamentally, right? There's walk-in restaurants and there's reservations-taking restaurants. And I think we are probably missing an opportunity to be somewhere in the middle, which is to say, I kind of find in a lot of cases reservations, you got to plan, you got to sort of like, you say it's 7:30, 2 people, that's when you got to show up, that's how many people you got to be. I think the opportunity on the consumer side is to kind of create a new range of products that help you plan and show up at a restaurant, right? So as an example, one kind of template that what we've been thinking about is if I show up between 7 and 9 o'clock, I will wait, I can wait, and I know I'm going to wait no more than 15 minutes. Is that better than a reservation? So I think it probably is in a lot of cases. Other templates which are more sort of explicitly tied to loyalty should be around as you visit more, right? You unlock different kinds of things about the experience, right? Like we obviously all understand in airlines, there's tiered programming, and if I'm United Global Service, I get picked up on the tarmac. If I'm 1K, half the time I get upgrades, all based on frequency, obviously. So other than some pretty rudimentary things that restaurants can do to help regulars, with tables, we don't have these tools in the restaurant industry to encourage people to show up in a variety of ways for a variety of occasions. And I actually think it's as much about setting that stuff up for consumers as it is for the merchants. I think consumers will be thrilled and delighted by those new formats and new opportunities.
Yeah, it's a pretty rich design space, I guess, when you think about it. I'd never, frankly, thought of that. So why crypto? Like you alluded, we have airline miles and credit card points and Starbucks, and there's various forms of loyalty that, I don't know, by all intents and purposes, seem to work. I'll take it at face value that they do. What does crypto allow you to do that you can't today with the legacy sort of platforms?
I think probably I have two answers to this question. The one why crypto answer is if you're building a technology company in 2022 and you want to build it with cutting edge technology, then crypto is the place you want to be building. Crypto is just as transformative. I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's just as transformative as lots of the other breakthroughs that at a time felt way too daring to adopt, right? If you were kind of more of a laggard. So the first answer is if you're building a technology company and you want it to be cutting edge, then crypto is the place you want to play. I think the second, and if you don't believe that, then the second answer is a little bit more direct in terms of why crypto specifically, and that is because I think what crypto sets up in terms of the dynamics to get a flywheel spinning is going to be very meaningful for this business. In particular, we can engage with and reward early adopters here in ways that I don't think we really could in a non-crypto environment. So, the way we can incentivize and partner with people, with both merchants and consumers that adopt this technology early through, tokenomics and lots of other things, I think is going to be pretty interesting.
Got it. And we're just now, I think Tushar earlier in sort of his opening remarks talked about the growth of the space, and part of that includes, big, massive companies, around the world that are household names doing the same thing, right? Getting on the cutting edge, using crypto, using, NFTs and Web3. I guess, what are some of the experiments that you've seen, that around consumer loyalty and crypto that you're particularly interested in?
What Tiffany did, with the punks is kind of cool. I think, specific in the restaurant space, I think what Gary Vee and his guys did with Fly Fish Club was kind of interesting. I mean, it's sort of like a starting point versus, the actual execution, but the idea that, you can use this stuff to raise $14 million for an idea of a restaurant and kind of raise $14 million, like kind of virtually no strings attached, is definitely new for restaurants. But now we're sort of seeing how they've developed, their community around this idea, and they spend a lot of time thinking about, well, how do we incentivize NFT holders to participate in the community, and how do we deliver value as we get this concept to market? I think that's been pretty interesting. I mean, obviously Nike has found really good product market fit with some of the stuff they've done. So yeah, I think you're kind of starting to see. Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty impressive that you could fundraise that much money for a restaurant. I hope it's in a location that I could even go to. But that sort of gives you an idea of the power that you have in creating a community and sort of being grassroots and having alignment around a shared ethos. How do we make this go mainstream? It's so like fringe right now, and we're talking restaurants, right? And like the stuff has to work. It has to work at scale, and there has to be global awareness and ability to interact and engage with it, how does this become mainstream? Like, how does everyone here end up using Blackbird?
I think you need to figure out, we need as an industry to figure out which really large scale consumer use cases to point the technology at. And I think what's exciting about Blackbird is restaurants may very well be one of those industries where you have a really humongous industry with lots of frequency and an engaged customer base, and you can use the technology and get good product market fit one way or another. But I also think, it's just part of the cycle of how technology develops. I mean, we need to take this code base now, and we need to take what has largely been engineering so far and put it in the hands of inspired product people and consumer products company builders and discover the magic. I think there's no question that's what's going to happen next, and that's where we are with it.
Why is now the right time to be building this?
I mean, well, we've heard answers today. It's good to build in crypto winter. It's. I think the why now is why not now. I think it's that. I think it's not. I don't think about why now. I think about is now as good a time as any. And I think the answer to that question is yes. I think specific to the restaurant industry, it's at the tail end of a couple of years of real turmoil. I think the restaurant industry really got tossed around in COVID, and there was existential crisis for quite a few restaurants that were out there. I think we've discovered probably more enthusiasm and sort of natural loyalty to restaurants among consumers than I think some restaurants even expected. And what I mean by that is, if you look at how consumers sort of rallied behind and around the restaurants they cared about the most, I think you could poll restaurant operators and they'd tell you they're pretty surprised by the results. Restaurants raised funds overnight just by saying to consumers, "We need your help," right? So I think restaurants discovered the strength of their brands, and as they did, are empowered to continue to accelerate the adoption of technology and try new things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think crypto's also come a long way. I think 2 years ago, this was probably possible to some degree, but I mean, just think of the lengths that the space has gone from, logging in with MetaMask and doing, it's all very desktop based. Now we're talking about, Solana mobile, and we've taken such strides in abstracting away a lot of the complexity and making, and I think we're doing a good job making this industry less of an engineering sort of industry. Engineering will always be at the core, but how do you sort of make it easy for people here to do it? And I think those advancements sort of help make this, I think, the right time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the why now on crypto for me is also why not now. And I think whenever you look at adoption of technology, one of the defining things is getting the consumer use cases to finally pull the technology forward. And so I think that's exactly what we're going to do here.
Yeah, and restaurants are just brutal competitions amongst restaurants,
yeah.
And then you have everyone in the ecosystem around it, right, from the credit card companies to the Resis of the world. Do the incumbent players embrace Web3 and loyalty around this, or does a company like Blackbird and new entrants have an edge there because of the baggage that some of these companies have?
I mean, look, the answers we'll find out, right? I think agility and boldness matter here. When it is cutting edge tech, sometimes companies, like American Express are slower to adopt. And I think it was said earlier, Apple tends to watch and see what happens first. So I think we'll probably expect similar things, but I think there'll be one or two incumbents that surprise us by jumping in early, and then innovation will make us all do better.
And with kind of a rich new design space to create new forms of engagement, like what does the end state of consumer loyalty look like to you? It's a very meta question.
The answer is I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I think what we should expect is direct connectivity. I think we should expect there to be incentivizing of consumers, incentive structures and gamification structures that make it more fun and make it more thrilling. And I think generally, what we're hoping with Blackbird is is to make it feel spontaneous and adventurous and ultimately very inspiring to be in and around and swim through this restaurant industry. And I think that the loyalty products have to deliver that. I think, when we were building Resi, what we always said was, we have to build technology in the service of hospitality. And I think that's going to ring true for Blackbird too. We have to build technology in the service of hospitality. And I think the difference here is, there we're focused on reservations, obviously. I think here we have to figure out how does hospitality extend in different directions that we maybe didn't expect it to? How do we sort of take the spirit of a restaurant, the sort of DNA of that restaurant, and instead of it just being about, well, I showed up and so I sit down and I get a menu and I order some food and that's the experience, how can we make that experience a little bit more dynamic? How can we extend it to before you walk in the restaurant? How can we extend it? How can we make it different if you're a regular? How can we make it different if you've never been there before, but we've identified you as somebody who's perhaps super valuable to the restaurant? I think in those ways, the technology, we basically have not explored at all how technology can enhance hospitality, but we're going to.
Yeah, that's exciting. What about, how does it resonate for building out the team? I mean, you got this great background obviously for it, and this, new crypto sort of renaissance. Are people excited? Are people questioning? Like, how has it been attracting talent?
People are very excited. I'll give you the very honest answer to this. So people are very excited. People are, I think, the big takeaways are really excited and inspired about the scale of our ambition, which I myself am excited and somewhat terrified by, but also, we've had a lot of conversations with people about, so where do you start, right? So I think I'm very lucky to have two folks on the team already who are passionate about this idea and, signed up for this adventure. And I think generally the conversations have been around people who have a passion for hospitality, who are inspired by the idea, and who are sort of ready to explore it a little bit and figure out what the hell we're going to do.
Yeah. Fast forward 5 years from now, what do you think Blackbird looks like?
What we will be doing is empowering restaurants to connect better with consumers and be more profitable. We didn't talk very much about, the second part of our ambition, which is to sort of figure out some of the pain points in the payments flow, which maybe we'll talk about next year at the summit. But I think we want to see restaurants in a place 5 years from now where they're confident in their ability to connect directly with consumers and they're more profitable as a result of using Blackbird than they are today.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, we're always looking for sort of positive sum outcomes, right? And I think crypto and the incentives behind it, give you the ability to really build something a little bit different in a way that everyone benefits, and it isn't really me versus you or anywhere else. So cool. I guess we can open it up, I think, for Q&A for a little bit if anyone has any questions.
When can we try it? I've had the same issue as you have, getting into restaurants, and there are ways. And I communicate with them via email, but it's a pain. You get to know the chef or somebody, and they know you, but it's one-off. So I can't wait.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited. The answer is we hope to start putting product into the market by the end of Q1, early Q2 next year. The dynamic pricing question. So the answer is that dynamic pricing in restaurants, so there's two answers to this question. And if you're a capitalist, the first answer is going to be unsatisfying. And that answer is hospitality, it just doesn't fully lend itself to dynamic pricing. There is an idea in hospitality that it should be democratic and to some extent first come, first serve. And in the United States, you can date this back to inns and certain regulations and requirements among innkeepers that, for example, if you had somebody who came up to your inn, you were required to feed them, right? So this is in the United States, the evolution of restaurants dates back there. You can go back further to Europe and other places where there's sort of similar ideas. So as I said, if you're a capitalist, that's not satisfying. So the second answer to the dynamic pricing question in restaurants is, it actually, to some extent, does exist. And it's just hidden in plain view by third parties who are essentially buying ahead for you, right? So all of the premium credit cards have access programs, and they're paying for those seats, right? So that's an example of how a restaurant is making more money at 7:30. It's not on the menu, but they're sort of building more profitability into 7:30. I think it's not going to ever be perfect, and I think more explicit sort of levers than that are problematic for C answer one. But I think if you really look closely, there's actually more of it than meets the eye.
How are you reaching out to the late adopters, the laggers? Will this be app-based? Will it be easy for someone who doesn't know anything about crypto to access?
So it's a great question. It's one of the key challenges in bringing this business to market. Our belief so far is that we're really going to lean on the restaurants, right? Like we're going to give the restaurants tools that, for a variety of reasons, are going to help them do better and deliver hospitality, and we're going to hope that they're willing to help with promotion. So I think it'll be a combination of us creating really compelling incentives on the consumer side, like Blackbird branded, our own access and surprise and delight things, as well as leaning on the restaurants to help us promote it with their own offers. And then we'll see where we get. That's the key challenge here. So the user interface is probably going to be an app of some kind. I think it's safe to assume. I think we need to figure out some gestures that are lower friction than an app install to sort of for initial engagement. But I think it's safe to assume there's going to be some mooring in an app with a wallet component to it.
Yes. So I have a bar, 4 restaurants, and some hot dog stands. We accept crypto since 2017. Nobody pays with it but me. So, and we use coinpayments.net, maybe you know it. No app on a consumer phone. You basically just scan a QR code with a wallet, very easy. Why do you think, so what is the beachhead market, and why do you think the adoption has not come so far in the restaurant business?
In terms of payments in particular?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's to some extent a why now question. I think it feels like things have become frothy enough where there's reason to be optimistic. I think there's a lack of understanding on the merchant side about how this stuff works, and I think equally there's a lack of understanding on the consumer side about how to use alternate forms of payment. I think our goal here, our job here as a company is to make paying with whatever you're going to pay with feel just like any other form of payment, meaning, you've got your 3 big credit card companies, but there's, as you said, there's lots of other ways to pay. So I think this is, it's going to be a bit of a nut to crack, but I think really, honestly, it starts with identifying pain points and friction points and solving for them, but then it's a lot of education and sort of large-scale incentivizing.
Cool. Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks, Ben, for sharing your insights. Appreciate it.